Moving to Parliament, well, the minority there is demanding a withdrawal of the Communication Minister's directive to the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation to close down 3 of its digital channels to create space on the digital terrestrial platform, which is currently 4. Minority MP on the Communications Committee, Sam George, says Esla Owusu, the Communications Minister, erred in writing to GBC since it is not under her control, but rather that of the Information Minister. The Minister, in a letter purportedly written on 26th of June, gave the GBC 60 days to act on the directive. Joseph Opoku-Gakpo is our man in Parliament. He's back. Joseph, let's begin with the letter and what exactly it says. It's good to see you, by the way.
Good to see you, Gifty. I've really missed you, and I'm glad to be back on your show. It's actually a one-page letter that the Communications Minister, Esla Owusu, wrote to the Director General of the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation. Let me run through it briefly. It says that this is with reference to the virtual meeting that the two sides had held the day before the letter was written, specifically on the 25th of June 2020, between officials at the Communications Ministry and officials of the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation. Now, we gather that the further communication says that further to the notice above in the mentioned discussions, the ministry hereby notifies you of its intention to reduce the number of channels your outfit currently occupies on the National Digital Terrestrial Television Network from 6 to 3 channels. This is to ensure that there is redundancy on the national DDT platform, which is currently at full capacity. And it goes on to say you will therefore be required to consolidate your programming in line with the directive. And the final paragraph says, kindly note that upon the planned future expansion of the network, which has been delayed due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the uncertainties generated in the global supply chains, you will be allocated additional channels. And it says, please take steps to implement this directive within 60 days of receipt of this letter. And so the explanation generally is that when it comes to the DDT platform, it's owned by the Ministry of Communication, and the decision that they've taken is that because there are up to 40 spaces on it, which are currently occupied, they would want to be able to have additional spaces in case government wants to do anything with it, including maybe national broadcasts that may have to run through it, or any other set situation, or maybe broadcasting any event of any sort, which is how come they need the redundancy. And they say if even national security wants to make use of it, they would want to be able to have that ability to be able to make use of it, which is how come that decision was taken towards the GBC to consolidate their platforms into 3 instead of the current 6. We gather that it's not just GBC that is being asked to do this. We are told Crystal TV also has about 3 different spaces on that. They are being asked to give up 1 so that then they continue to hold on to 2. So government says they are not specifically targeting GBC alone, but it's because they have need for those digital terrestrial platforms.
I'm sure that this has drawn a lot of reactions. Let's begin with within Parliament, which is what we started the story with. The minority, the spokesperson for on the Communications Committee, Sam George, Member of Parliament for Ningo Pram, has raised some concerns. Tell us what these concerns are.
So himself and ABF Husseini, who is the minority ranking member on the Committee on Communications and also the minority spokesperson, they've been addressing the media here in Parliament, and they're raising a number of issues. First of all, they think that the Communication Minister erred in communicating to the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation because GBC is actually not under their purview. But government has also been responding to those concerns. The explanation coming from government is that the Information Ministry does not necessarily own those platforms. That specific DDT platform, they say, is owned by the Communications Ministry. And so government in response cites a very interesting example that there are several of these platforms. The government one, which is the DDT, which has the 40 spaces, is there. Multi-TV, the site, is also another such platform that exists. DSTV also has one of such platforms. Now, the example government cites is if Multi-TV wants any organization that's hosting itself on the Multi-TV platform to actually consolidate or cut down on the number of platforms that it has, it has to be multi-TV right into the organization and not the information ministry. In that same way, because the communication ministry owns that particular platform, then they would actually have to communicate it as such. Again, Samuel George, the Nego Pram MP, has been raising concerns, claiming that they think that we are getting into a political season and that government may have need for these additional platforms to transmit maybe their own election results on election day so they can collate their figures better. Or even, according to Sam George, they're seeing a situation where it could even be politically motivated, because he says that they know of Asase TV that's coming up, that's looking for space within the digital platform space to actually run. And so they would want answers as to whether really government would want to create this space for Asase. And again, Samuel George makes a point that there is a plan transitioning to a digital terrestrial space, which is actually going to provide an infinite amount of space for various TV platforms. So they're asking that, why isn't government focused on creating a situation where they'll do the migration so there is actually more than enough space for everyone to occupy, rather than approaching this, in some John's words, the lazy way, by just taking from one side and creating the redundancy. And so they're raising those concerns, and they say they would want to particularly hear from not just the communications minister, but the information minister on why he's allowing this to happen to the GBC.
We'll come back to Joseph, to you for more of those reactions, but Sam George has been speaking, like you said, they've been addressing that press conference. Let's hear from him now.
Communications have the authority, the legal mandate, to instruct the GBC to shut down 3 of its channels. The GBC is not an agency under the Ministry of Communications. The GBC is under the Ministry of Information. We would have loved to see a directive from the sector minister. This is akin to the Minister for Interior writing to the Chief of Army Staff, instructing him to release military men from the 5th Infantry Battalion, when the Minister for Interior has no mandate or control over the Ghana Armed Forces. That's the Minister of Defense's remit. If the Minister for Communication did have any need for channels, the right procedure would have been to request of her colleague minister, the Minister for Information, to respond or do what she wanted to do. So we want to understand if the Minister for Information was in the know, because we see in the letter that he was copied. It was not a joint letter written by both of them. The next question we want to ask is, what is the reason for government's need? We are told that the DTT is, if you read the minister's letter, she says that the DTT is at full capacity and government does need spectrum. Well, if government needs spectrum, the ministry should rather be focused on completing the digital switchover. Because when they complete the digital switchover, you're going to have a lot of white spaces, which is additional spectrum for governments to use. I mean, this is, for want of a better phrase, a lazy approach at trying to get spectrum, if really the need is spectrum. Because if the need is spectrum, everybody knows that when you do the digital switchover, you're going to get a lot of analog spaces that national security, whatever government considerations, in fact, it's going to have considerations for bandwidth in the country and speed of bandwidth. So the ministry should have rolled over or done the switchover in 2017. It's 3 years and over late, and the ministry is finding shortcuts to get spectrum. Again, we want to understand what the real need for spectrum is. Another question we want to ask the Ministry of Communications is this not another example of state capture?
So, Joseph, I'm coming back to you. That is the Member of Parliament for Ningo Pram there, raising the questions that the minority say they have. But there's been a response. You touched a bit on that earlier. The Communications Minister herself has been speaking about this. A summary of what she says, and we can hear her too.
This is actually in the interest of the nation to ask GBC to consolidate its channels, and that it doesn't amount to any form of interference in their work, and that it's actually in the national interest that there are those additional platforms which will be left unoccupied in times of emergency and when government needs it. She's been addressing the media here in Parliament House.
The minister, the Member of Parliament for Ningo Pram makes certain sweeping assertions which can only be from the figment of an overactive imagination. I have no application or I don't know of any application by Asase Radio, which is pending before the NCA for allocation of channels on any platform. What I am aware of is that there is a huge backlog of applications spanning from 2017 when we took over. So this is not a new occurrence, but we're faced with a pandemic, which makes it difficult for us to even complete the switchover process because of the cost implications on broadcasters. So the discussions are, what do we do to free up excess capacity? Right now, if the state has need of broadcasting urgent communication to the public, it does not have any means of doing so. If national security has need of broadcasting urgent communication to the state, to the citizens, it has no means of doing so. It is critical for us at this juncture to be faced with a process in which the only platform for broadcasting to the populace, the capacity on it, is completely used up. And so it just makes sense, without reading any ulterior motives into it, to work to create additional capacity on it in the event that that capacity is needed. Now, every other station on this platform is being hosted on one channel. And there's a difference between the channels on the DTT platform and the spectrum being utilized to provide that service. That channel is 40. That it has 40 channel capacity on the DTT platform, which is full. Every other station apart from GBC and Crystal TV is broadcasting on one channel. Has that affected their ability to transmit their information or their knowledge to the world and the rest of the Ghanaian populace? No. They are quite capable and have been using the access that they have on the DTT channel to do their work without interference from anybody. And that cannot be the motive under which the ministry is operating. Is it possible for GBC to transmit its various program offerings more efficiently from 3 channels as against 6? We've had conversations with the Ministry of Information, who assures us that it is. On the 24th of June, we had a meeting with both Crystal TV and GBC, and the Minister for Information was supposed to be in that meeting. Unfortunately, due to circumstances beyond his control, he was unable to be in that meeting with us. And it was at that meeting that we informed the 2 channels that they are the only 2 stations, 2 broadcasters, which have multiple channels on the DTT platform. And their multiple channels are also being carried for free by the state. And we don't think that's an efficient use of scarce resources, and indicated to them that they should look at ways in which they can consolidate their programming and use half of the channels that they currently occupy to project their channels.
Eslo Usokufo is the communications minister with an explanation there. I'll go back to Joseph to wrap up with him. Joseph, so let's talk about the... Joseph, can you hear me? Okay. Joseph went all frozen up on me. So I'm going to go back or go on the telephone lines now. I'm joined by Executive Director of the Media Foundation for West Africa, Suleiman Brahima. Mr. Brahima, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. And I'm sure that you have heard about this news already. What do you make of it?
Well, thank you very much for having me. I think that what the minister or what the government is seeking to do through the minister is untenable, and I think that it is quite dangerous for our democracy. Now, there is a reason why in our Constitution, Article 167 clearly indicates that the responsibility or give the mandate of insulating the state-owned broadcasters or the state-owned media and give that privilege to the National Media Commission as the body that would make sure that the state-owned media are insulated from governmental control. And this is not my language, it is the language of the Constitution. And indeed, it also makes it clear that in the performance of its function, the NMC shall not be subject to the control and direction of any entity. Now we are talking about channels, not any other property of GBC. We are talking about operational channels of the GBC. We are not talking about channels that are redundant, as in they are there and they are not being used for broadcast. These are active channels. And for each of the channels that the GBC is currently broadcasting on, there is a dedicated service. If you take Obonu TV, it serves the Ghana community, the Dangwe community, and so on and so forth in Greater Accra. GBC Sports has been the single channel that GBC uses to bid for international rights for, international sports competitions and so on and so forth. That makes it possible for Ghanaian audience to be able to access such content. If you take GTV and GBC, GTV News, these are the channels that the station has been using to do all the public service broadcasts, including carrying live events of from the presidency, from parliament, and so on and so forth. It is therefore very surprising that even in the minister's letter, she did not see the relevance of the National Media Commission in this endeavor. And so if you look at the people or organizations that are copied in the letter, the NMC is not mentioned in this letter. So it copied the Minister for Information, Director General NCA, the Managing Director ILC Consultants, and I'm told that's an entity that advises the ministry on the DTT process, and the Chief Executive of KNET. Now we are talking about, you are going to touch the operations of a state broadcaster that is under the National Media Commission. The governing board of the GBC is appointed by the NMC. Then they intend to appoint the Director General and so on and so forth. And the minister didn't even find the need to copy the NMC on this. That's number one. Number two is that the minister is talking about the DTT platform being full. And the question to ask is, who filled it? As at the time they were filling it, didn't she know, or didn't NCA know, that the multiplex was getting full? For example, on 23rd April 2020, that was when Wuntumi TV, for example, was authorized. As at the time they were authorizing that TV to be on the DTT platform, didn't they know that the multiplex was getting choked? And in any case, why would it be the state asset, the one that is serving the entire public, that must be touched? And the minister says if they need a channel to broadcast in a state of emergency. I mean, for God's sake, we are in this, when the president is addressing the nation on COVID, I believe that you can have access to it on dozens of radio stations, dozens of TV stations. And that is precisely what GBC, GTV exists to do. So what is this point about if we need a channel to broadcast in a state of emergency? What is then the purpose of GBC? So I think that the arguments are completely untenable. There might be reasons why they would want to do what they intend to do. But finally, I think this provides a very unique and great opportunity for the National Media Commission to assert its independence and to assert its relevance within, the media ecosystem. Otherwise, I believe a time would come that the GBC will be directed as to what program to broadcast and what program not to broadcast, who to present what program, and so on and so forth. And I don't think that is how to build a democracy.
Interesting points you make there, Mr. Brima. But just a quick one. So she indicates that the GBC has 6 channels, and they're being asked to consolidate these channels into 3. Can GBC not broadcast its programs on these 3 channels effectively? Because there's also a question that people have raised about how many people are watching all these 6 channels anyway.
Well, I think that, again, that is not a question that is tenable. There's a reason why the BBC operates more than 10 channels. Is it the case that with all the resources that they have, they could not or they cannot consolidate their programs on 5 or 4 channels. As I did mention, I've seen a document in which GBC outlines what each of the channels, is used for. Is it the learning channel, the learning TV that must be collapsed at this stage when our kids are relying on that for e-learning? Is it Obonu TV that is serving a certain community that must be collapsed? Is it GTV that must be, scrapped? Is it GTV News that must be scrapped? Is it the GTV Sports that must be scrapped? So the question of how many people are watching this or that, I don't think it comes in. And those of us here in Accra, we can make that argument because we have choices. But if you go to Damango, or if you go to Bunkrugu, or you go to, Sehuyo or so, or Sehuyo Akontomra, the people there rely on the GBC services to be able to access television. And therefore, to say that how many people are watching these programs, perhaps we would be arguing from an elitist point of view because we can do pay TV and watch our Al Jazeera and BBC and CNN and so on and so forth, or multi-TV. But that is not what the people in the rural areas who can access television rely on. And I think that if there is any time that the relevance of GBC and its channels is critical, it is now.
Right.
When we need free channels, public service channels to educate people and so on and so forth. And for God's sake, look, these the DTT platform now currently is cited at 42 places. It has 42 sites. 38 of these are operating on GBC property. 38 out of the 42, DTT sites are on GBC facilities. How much is being paid to GBC for this? And then when you have to make a decision, you say that the owner of 38 of the sites is the one who must sacrifice his channel. I don't think that is fair. And I don't think that, as I said, this is how we want to manage the state-owned media in this country. And as I said, I think the NMC owes all Ghanaians a responsibility to make sure that the state broadcaster is truly and precisely insulated as the Constitution mandates them to do.
I was coming to that bit where I wanted to find out what options are there. Apart from the minority raising questions about this, what other options are there to, the GBC, for example, to the people of Ghana if they feel that this is not a right move to make. But you mentioned that the NMC should assert its independence and that this is an opportunity for the NMC to do so. But let me bring you back to some of the issues that people raise. You can call it a conspiracy theory, and for that risk I will take that people say that the NMC itself, members of the NMC, are appointed by the government anyway. So if you're talking about asserting independence, how realistic is that even?
Well, it is not true to say that members of the NMC are appointed by the government. The composition of the National Media Commission is clearly spelled out in the Constitution, and it talks about a representative from the Bar Association, publishers and owners of private press. It talks about the Ghana Association of Writers, and Library Association, the Christian group, the Muslim group. It talks about the trade institutions of journalism, the Ghana Advertising Association, the Ghana National Association of Teachers, and then, of course, 2 representatives by the Ghana Journalists Association. And then the government has perhaps 2 people from Parliament, the majority side, and then 3 persons nominated by the President. Of course, I'm very much aware that this is the very first time that we have a situation where one of the representatives of the President is the chairperson or the chairman of the commission. But in decision making, I don't think that the chairman's role is that of, something like the speaker, where he can overrule or permit a statement to be made and so on and so forth. The chairman has 1 vote. Of course, he may have a casting vote. But these, I believe, the people on the commission are respected people. The Constitution gives them a very important role. And we look up to them at this time to save us from this encroachment by government. Because as I said, if this is allowed, the next time we hear, it will be about government deciding for GBC what programs it must broadcast and what programs it shouldn't broadcast. So we look up to the National Media Commission to assert itself and ensure that the state broadcaster is truly insulated from governmental control,
That's the only option available, apparently.
Governmental control.
That's the only option available, isn't it?
Well, I mean, what is to be done, really, I don't think it is constitutional, because the government is seeking to control the GBC, because what it intends to do is to cut programming. Because, as I said, if you take out GTV Sports, you are cutting programming. If you take up GTV News, you are cutting programming. If you take up Obonu TV, you are cutting programming. So it's inherent, it is clearly something to do with the operations of the corporation.
Okay.
And that, how it is done, is the mandate of the National Media Commission and not a government. And this is not the first time we are having a government under the Fourth Republic. I mean, okay. we had the Rawlings regime, the Kufuor regime, the Mills regime, Mahama regime, and this regime. This is the only time we are hearing that the government is saying we want to take out some broadcasting content, because that is what it means. If you take out GTV Sports, you are taking out a certain content from GBC. And I don't think that that should be allowed, because it invariably amounts to direct governmental control of the state broadcaster. And if that were to be allowed, very soon we will hear about government giving directives to Daily Graphic and Ghanaian Times on what to publish and what not to publish.
Right.
And I don't think that when we were coming into democracy, this is the kind of situation we wanted for our state-owned media. And again, just for us finally, we all know that the National Media Commission, for example, recently set up a committee to look into GBC and propose the necessary reforms for the corporation. Why would the government not? And it is something that the government is fully aware of. It is chaired by this eminent Ghanaian journalist, Madame Elizabeth Ohene. So why is it that at a time when GBC is supposed to be assessed and reforms proposed, that is the time the same government is saying that we are taking away some of your channels because the multiplex platform is full. When
Right.
at the same time, just recently, they were awarding frequencies to persons perhaps close to government. I think this is dangerous. This is not acceptable, and it mustn't be allowed to happen.
Mr. Brima, I thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Suleiman Brima is the Executive Director of the Media Foundation for West Africa there. His position, this is not right and this is unconstitutional. He's looking towards the National Media Commission to do what he says, a session of their independence. This is certainly a story that's still developing. We'll keep our eyes on it, bring you more on that. This is still The Pulse with me, Gifty Andop.